if in this relationship, if you can't handle that, then it's probably best that you and that part of me never meet. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Monday Morning Moments with Mark. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about boundaries and how they help us build healthy relationships. But before we get into that, I want to jump right to the funniest thing. The funniest thing that happened this week was while I was at Subway, which I don't actually go there very often, but this one was a pretty comedic experience. At least I thought so. So I go in there, and they're telling me all the things they don't have. Which turned into its own sub comedy show. But while I'm thinking about what I want to order, this corporate type guy comes over and says, "Hi, I'm Jim from Subway. You mind if I ask you a couple questions?" I said, "Sure, Jim, but that's one. What else?" So I answer his survey, and he goes on about his business, sits down, and the young lady's making my sandwich or whatever. And I turn and I said, "Hey, I like the way you introduce yourself as Jim from Subway, like you're from somewhere else or something, wearing a corporate shirt." He's like, "Well, I could have got this shirt anywhere. I could just be Jim from the block." And he goes, "Oh, wait, that's Jenny." And I laugh, and the manager, who's probably a few years older than me, she laughs, and the young lady making the sandwich doesn't get it. I said, do you know why that was funny? Do you know who Jenny from the block is? She said, no. And I said, "Oh, well, you probably shouldn't watch Super Bowl halftime show either, because I don't think you'll get that." And again, the three of us laughed. She didn't get it. She goes, "I don't watch football, so it's okay." Anyways, showing my age, but I thought it was pretty funny. Experience. So, moving on to boundaries and how they're important to us. First thing I want to do is I want to clarify there's a big difference between boundaries and demands. Demands is simply you stating what you will and won't do, which is okay. Um, but a lot of times they might not be met. Boundaries is you explaining why those things matter to you, why it is important to you that this person doesn't cross whatever certain lines with you. Really, what it is that importance is you conveying your value system to them, and I'm going to explain that more a little bit here in a minute. Being able to do that is what allows us to build healthy relationships because now people know, to what level they can and cannot interact with us, and where they can leverage certain things within the relationship. And it doesn't matter if we're talking about a relationship with, an employee-employer relationship or a friend relationship, spouse relationship, or even your relationship with yourself. It doesn't matter. And yes, we have to have boundaries in our relationship with ourselves. Most of the time, we are the number one person that violate our boundaries, so it is important that we understand them. I'm going to do that and explain this by something that I just recently learned about myself, psychosynthesis. And I'm not going to get into all the science and everything behind it and all the conscious psychology parts of it. But the basic premise of it is that you have your I, that is your core value, your set of core values, the who you really are. And then you have this set of sub personalities that borrow from the I and kind of have their own deal. And think of it more of like the different roles that you might have in your life, um, whether it be parent, spouse, employee, whatever different roles you take on in life, that are parts of the relationships I talked about. Each one of those has its own subset of values, and within that, the boundary kind of interacts with those. So I have this little diagram here to help me explain this. So this is your I. That's the core part of who you are, right? Your core values, and you have your sub personalities, and the boundary that you set interacts with them. So these two up here, those two personalities, whatever they may be, the boundary goes through, and that's sort of like that personality's tolerance level. I'll let you this much of me. I can give this much of me before you're going to cross the line, and then this person's going to take over and not, not go any further. Um, and then same here. This one is entirely inside the boundary, and I'll explain that in a minute. This one is entirely outside the boundary. So the boundary really has different interaction points with our different subpersonalities, but I want to talk about these two. This one right here that's outside the boundary, that personality of me has no care in the world for this boundary and is probably not ever really going to interact, or it's not going to be, it's going to be inconsequential. This one over here that's inside the boundary is kind of like, the idea is that your subpersonalities protect the I, right? We make sure that the I and that core set of values never gets violated, okay? Unless you have made it to a point in the relationship where you're going to drop the boundaries and you're willfully letting that person into your core values. That's a whole different situation. But this person right here that's inside the boundary is that's that personality that if if in this relationship, if you can't handle that and the relationship isn't evolved to the point where you can handle that, then it's probably best that you and that part of me never meet. So the idea is that, so if your boundary, and I intentionally drew this line coming up here, if your boundary is being pushed, right, and you get to the point where it gets too close to the eye, this part of your personality right here is gonna swoop in guns blazing to save the day, okay, to make sure that the eye doesn't get violated, right? But the idea is to not let that happen and allow these other more tolerable parts to come in. And also, I'm not talking about, like, you're not hiding this from a person. They need to be aware that that part of you exists. And in order to understand, it helps them understand the importance of the boundaries, that there's a certain part of your life, certain part of your makeup that I'm not ready to know about yet, right? Or is completely inconsequential. There are certain parts of your life that your employer-employee relationship has no business ever meeting, right? Um, but understanding that and growing through that, letting the boundaries shift healthfully, right, in a helpful way that makes the relationship grow and flourish, is the importance of the boundaries, right? It's allowing positive forward growth in the relationship, and that is why it is so important that when you set boundaries, that the in a relationship, that the other person understand why the boundary matters to you, what values they can expect to see you interacting with them in the relationship, and then also understanding that there's a certain line, if you cross, this other part of me is going to come out, and we don't want to do that, and we don't do that. So it helps them not push the boundaries too far too fast and allow things to evolve in a healthy way. So I encourage you to examine your boundaries, examine your subpersonalities, get to know yourself a little bit better, and help define yourself within the relationships that you're involved with so that you can grow forward positively. Have a great week.